All offseason long, the Seahawks defensive line depth was touted as maybe the biggest strength for this football team. That depth is now going to be put to the ultimate test against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football. Can they survive a litany of injuries? Going to be breaking it all down in a bonus edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in from West Seattle or in Columbus, Ohio. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. It is a bonus emergency Saturday episode, maybe the most nightmarish scenario imaginable, getting ready to play a physical, ground and pound football team in the Detroit Lions. The Seahawks today announcing their final injury report with not one, not two, not three, 4 key defensive linemen being ruled out. Now the real question is, can the Seahawks survive this litany of injuries? Before I dive into those, Mike McDonald was asked today in his weekly final press conference how the Seahawks are going to be able to get by and what this means for their defensive line. Take a listen.
Well, I wouldn't say it's any different than when people are we've got 4 guys that are down. That's 4 more guys are going to be up. Looking forward to seeing those guys play. You know, when you talk about having depth in your football team, you want the feeling to be like, okay, I can't wait to see, whoever's going to get that opportunity now. So that's our view, is that guys are going to have more opportunities than they've usually had, and looking forward to seeing what they do.
It's all about the next man up. It was a mantra that Pete Carroll lived by. Mike McDonald certainly subscribes to that as well. But when you are missing 4 high-quality players on the defensive line, in specifics, Boye, Mafe is not going to play in this game. He's got a knee injury that's still bothering him some, so they're holding him out. You do have 2 games coming up in a 5-day span against the Giants and 49ers. McDonald admitted that played into the decision-making process about who was going to be available in this game in Detroit. With it still only being week 4, don't want to make decisions that are going to end up getting guys hurt for a longer term. So Boye Mafe's out. Leonard Williams is out with his rib injury. Byron Murphy II, hamstring issue. He is sidelined, will miss the first game in his young career. And Uchenna Nwosu, the Seahawks hoped he would be back before 4 games. That's why they didn't put him in reserve. Well, he's still going to miss 4 games, going to be out for a 4th consecutive game. You look at this injury report, those 4 defensive linemen being sidelined, that is as good of a starting lineup as you are going to find in the NFL with those 4 players, and none of them are going to be suiting up against the Detroit Lions. And look, this is an opponent. Detroit has a top 5 rushing offense with Jahmyr Gibbs as well as David Montgomery. The offensive line is going to be hurting a little bit. They're going to be missing Frank Ragnow, their Pro Bowl center. So maybe that makes this a little less of a disadvantage for the Seahawks with all the pieces that they are missing. But still, Detroit still has a really good offensive line, and that's one player. The Seahawks are going to be missing 4 key players. If you're looking for a silver lining here, Ken Walker III, the running back, he's good to go. He is going to play after missing the last 2 games. And Seahawks are going to need to lean on him so the Detroit Lions are not on offense on the field. Keep that offense on the sideline to mitigate these losses. But when you look at what this means for the Seahawks, you are missing several of your most versatile players. Byron Murphy II's played everywhere from nose to 3-tech to base end. Leonard Williams has played all of those positions. You're talking about 2 invaluable chess pieces that Mike McDonald and his staff have at their disposal, that they can move up and down the line, that they can do a lot of fun stuff with. You can do stunts with these guys. There's all kinds of things that you now are not going to be able to do, at least not as high of a level, with both those players being out. And even off the edge, Boye Mafe's got 3 sacks in 3 games. That's a huge loss. Uchenna Nwosu, they've been able to survive without him because they've had Boye Mafe and they've had Derek Hall. But now you only have Derek Hall. You need Draymond Jones to elevate his game. I think Draymond Jones is going to end up playing some inside in this game out of necessity, just as he did the end of the game last week with both Williams and Murphy being out. It is really going to be a challenge for Mike McDonald and his coaching staff. And I tweeted this out a little bit ago, and I believe this wholeheartedly. Give Mike McDonald Coach of the Year. If he finds a way to get this group with all the pieces missing to perform well enough that the Seahawks can win this game in Detroit. They are at a major disadvantage with these guys out. How can they survive, though? That's really the question. What are Mike McDonald, Adam Durde, and company doing behind the scenes, trying to put a game plan together to try to mitigate the losses of all those marquee players on the defensive line against an opponent that's going to be looking to take advantage of that? Guaranteed Detroit's going to be coming out running the football, ready to roll. And they're going to look to take advantage of the fact that 2 top pass rushers on the outside are not going to be available for the Seahawks either. When you look at the depth chart right now for the Seahawks, Jonathan Hankins and Jaron Reed are still there in the middle. That's the one good thing. You do have proven veteran starters that are going to be ready to go. But if they're going to have Hankins in there in 5-man fronts, Mike Morris, I would think, is probably going to be the one that gets the starting nod at that second defensive tackle spot. He has never started a game in the NFL. Miles Adams has looked good every opportunity that he's had the last 3 years, but he's not played very many snaps. We don't know how he is going to play against a really good Detroit offensive line, playing significant snaps that he's rarely seen in the regular season. So there's question marks there. Do you call up somebody like a DeVere Levelston who had a good preseason? I mean, they are lacking depth at that 3-tech position right now without Williams and Murphy. At the nose tackle spot, they did sign Quinton Bohanna and Matt Gotel's back. So they get a couple of big bodies that they can potentially elevate one of those guys from the practice squad. But if they were just dealing with injuries in the interior, it'd be easier. You could just elevate both those guys. But because you are going to be missing Boye, Mafe, and Uchenna Nwosu at the edge positions, you would think one of those practice squad elevations is going to have to be off the edge. I would think it's going to be Tyus Bowser playing for a second straight week. His experience in Mike McDonald's defense in Baltimore, I would think he is going to be the one that gets that call along with one of the nose tackles, Bohanna or Gotel, coming up to bolster the depth in the defensive line. But there's a lot of asterisks on that chart. Those of you that were just watching on YouTube, there's more players there that could be potential practice squad elevations than there are actual bodies that are healthy that are on the 53-man roster. And the Seahawks are not in a position where they're going to want to put Boye, Mafe or Uchenna Nwosu or Williams or Murphy on injured reserve to open up a roster spot, because then they're going to have to miss 3 additional games after that. Now, if Murphy's hamstring's bad enough, maybe that's a situation that they are exploring, but I don't think the Seahawks are wanting to do that. So you don't have an extra roster spot to try to get 3 of these guys playing. The onus is going to fall on people like Trevis Gipson. He is going to have to play a lot of snaps. They traded for him as an insurance policy when Nwosu got hurt. Now you've got Mafe also out. Gibson's going to play a lot. He's a guy that's played a little bit inside in the past, so there's a little more positional flexibility there. Tyus Bowser getting called up. He played, I believe, 9 or 10 snaps last week against the Dolphins. He's going to play a lot more than that in this game. I would guarantee that he's going to be called up. But onus is falling on those guys, Matt Gotel or Quinton Bohanna, whoever gets that nod at the nose tackle position. Jonathan Hankins can't play 100% of the snaps. They are going to need one of those big body guys to be able to come in and take up space, eat up double teams against this very good running Lions football team. And so you're putting a lot of pressure. Mike McDonald was saying it, they're looking for guys that are excited to see play, and that's the right attitude to have here. But the drop off in talent here, when you are relying on practice squad guys, and that's the right word here, they're going to be relying on players like Bowser, Bohanna, or Gotel to play a lot of snaps against a really good Detroit Lions football team. And not having Ragnow in there is going to help a little bit in Seattle's favor, but still, it's a really good Detroit offensive line. That's one guy missing. Seattle's missing a lot more than that on their front line. As far as survival goes, look, they are going to need players like Miles Adams and Mike Morris to elevate their games and not just look like situational, seldom used reserves. These guys are going to have to put a lot of plays in the field on 3 downs. They're going to have to be able to rush the passes. They're going to have to be able to defend the run. And at the edge position, Derek Hall and Draymond Jones are going to play the majority of the snaps. But again, Trevis Gipson, we traded for you. Now this is your chance to show what you can do. A guy that has had a 7-sack season before. Can he dip back into that season back in 2021, that talent, and maybe put some pass rushing reps together, put a little pressure on Jared Goff, and then Tyus Bowser? I mean, this is going to be a major challenge, the biggest challenge that McDonald has had in his coaching career to this point, with all these injuries. And now the mastermind's got to figure out a way to move all these parts around, guys that are practice squad players or players that don't play a lot of snaps and now are going to be playing extensive snaps. He is going to have to figure out a way to try to mesh that group together and make it that they can be formidable up front and not let the Lions run all over them. So again, this is the biggest challenge that Mike McDonald has had as a head coach with the injuries that they've got in that defensive line and the opponent they're getting ready to play. It's not a good combination. We're going to find out just what he and his staff are made out of in terms of game planning and trying to get the most they can get out of a group that is going to be significantly depleted and short-staffed on the defensive line. And ultimately, their ability to that's going to be what, ultimately decides whether or not the Seahawks are going to be able to make this a competitive game and maybe stay undefeated. This is also a type of situation that could make it very difficult for the Seahawks to stay competitive in this game. If that front line struggles, Detroit is able to win the line of scrimmage, it could be a long night. Again, it's a nightmarish scenario. The good coaching staffs, the great coaching staffs, they find a way to work around these things. But this is going to be, even for a coach of McDonald's wit, is going to be a very large challenge for him to try to manage with all these players being out on the road in prime time. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're tuning in after the game Monday night. It won't be that late in the Pacific time zone, but we will have our post-game show. There's also going to be a bonus episode coming up on Monday afternoon with Rob Rang and myself as we continue to dive into this matchup. And I'm sure plenty more talk about this questionable defensive line that the Seahawks should be rolling out against the Lions on Monday night. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and your weekend. Go Hawks.